On the morning of July 6, 2026, a United States Park Service ranger was walking the northwest tip of Horn Island, a barrier island about 10 miles off the Mississippi Gulf Coast. At around 8:45 a.m., the ranger found a body in the water. It was Nolan Xavier Wells. He was 18 years old. 2 days earlier, Nolan had ridden a boat out to that island with friends to celebrate the 4th of July. The boat came back to the mainland at 4:31 p.m. Nolan did not. More than a month later, no one has been charged in connection with his death. The Mississippi State Medical Examiner has completed the official autopsy. Those findings have not been released to the public. A second autopsy, paid for by his family, could not determine a cause of death or a manner of death. But 3 people have been arrested in this case. Not one of them was on Horn Island that day. Not one of them appears to have known Nolan Wells at all. This is the full timeline of what investigators have confirmed, minute by minute, and everything they still have not. If you follow cases while they're still unfolding, and not just after the verdict, hit subscribe now. We track this one all the way through. Let's start with who Nolan Wells actually was. He was from Ocean Springs, Mississippi, a small coastal city in Jackson County, right across the bay from Biloxi. He played wide receiver at Ocean Springs High School. He stood about 6 feet 1 inch tall and weighed around 180 pounds. In February 2025, on National Signing Day, he signed to continue playing football at Southwest Mississippi Community College. He spoke to WLOX that day. He said it was a blessing to be going to college with some of his best friends and teammates. His mother is Christine Wells Wansley, a nurse who has worked in Mississippi for her entire career. His father is Elmore Wansley. His high school head coach, Jake Bramlett, later said Nolan was the kind of son, teammate, friend, and student that every coach hopes to have in a program. Ocean Springs High School principal Dr. Jacob Dykes described him as a remarkable student who left a lasting impression on his teachers and teammates. Southwest Mississippi Community College President Dr. J. Stephen Bishop said the entire school was heartbroken. On Friday, July 3rd, 2026, Nolan cooked dinner for his parents at home. Then he left to stay the night at a friend's house. His mother has said that was the last time she heard from him. Now, the location matters here, so let's be precise about it. Horn Island is not a resort. It is not a public beach. It is part of the Gulf Islands National Seashore. That means it is federal land, administered by the National Park Service. According to the Park Service, the island has no staff, no drinking water, no shelter, no facilities, and no communication infrastructure of any kind. There is no cell service you can rely on. There is no dock. There is no lifeguard. There is no one there. The only way to reach it is by private boat. That single fact shapes everything that follows in this case, because it means that once you are on that island, the only record of what happened is what the people there choose to say, and whatever their phones happened to capture. Now to Saturday, July 4th, 2026. The Mississippi Department of Marine Resources later released GPS records that establish the movements of the boat Nolan traveled on. Those records give us hard times. The boat left a private dock in the Ocean Springs area at approximately 9:56 a.m. It arrived at the western tip of Horn Island at 11:14 a.m. Nolan was not alone, and this was not a small group. Multiple boats made the trip that day, carrying a large gathering of young people, many of them former Ocean Springs High School classmates. One friend, Javon Williams, later told the Sun-Herald that he was originally supposed to ride on the same boat as Nolan, but that boat filled up, so he went on a different one. Through the late morning and into the afternoon, people swam, ate, and spent the holiday on the beach. At some point that afternoon, a video was recorded that would later become one of the most argued about pieces of material in this entire case. We'll come back to it. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office says Nolan Wells was last seen at approximately 3 p.m. His friends have given the same time. 3 p.m. What happened after 3 p.m. is the center of this case. At approximately 4 p.m., a teenager on the boat Nolan had arrived. On placed a call to Sea Tow, a private marine towing company. The Mississippi Department of Marine Resources later released the audio of that call under a public records request. On the recording, the caller reports that they are at the west tip of Horn Island. He says the bilge pump has stopped working. A bilge pump is the pump that clears water out of the bottom of a boat. Without it, water accumulates. He tells the dispatcher the boat is going down. The dispatcher asks whether everyone on board is okay. The caller says yes, everyone is on board. He gives the dispatcher GPS coordinates just off the northwest tip of Horn Island. He asks for the boat to be towed to the Fort Bayou launch. He tells the dispatcher there are about 7 people on board. The dispatcher then speaks with a sea tow captain, who says he is already on the phone with the boat's owner, a relative of the teenager who called. The captain then relays that the owner said the group did not need help right now, but would call back if that changed. The call appears to disconnect. Sea tow never towed that boat. In a statement later given to NBC News, Sea tow said that before assistance was rendered, the vessel owner advised that sea tow was no longer needed because help had already been obtained. The company said its involvement concluded at that point. That help, according to accounts given publicly, came from another boat owner who was in the area, a 21-year-old who was also on the island that day. Now here is where the GPS data picks the story back up. According to Marine Resources records, the boat left Horn Island at 4:31 p.m. It was towed for approximately 2.75 miles, traveling between 0.06 and 4.2 knots. Then normal operations resumed, and the boat began traveling at 34 knots. It entered Fort Bayou at approximately 5:52 p.m. It returned to the dock at 6:06 p.m. At 7:19 p.m., it went to the Fort Bayou boat launch, was pulled out of the water, and was towed over land to its owner's home in Biloxi. That is a complete, documented, time-stamped record of a boat. And Nolan Wells was not on it. Now let's go to that night. The United States Coast Guard later told WLOX that at around 11 p.m. on July the 4th, a friend of Nolan's contacted the agency. The Coast Guard would not disclose the content of that call. It said only that the call did not require Coast Guard assistance. At 11:07 p.m., Christine Wansley received a phone call about her son. She called a friend whose 2 sons were also friends with Nolan and asked if anyone had seen him. They hadn't. They checked his Snapchat location. Christine then checked Life 360, a separate location-sharing app. The 2 apps did not agree. Life 360 showed Nolan's phone back on land. At approximately 11:49 p.m., Christine Wansley called the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources and reported her son missing. Marine Resources forwarded her to the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. Because Horn Island sits out in the Mississippi Sound, there was, in her words, some back and forth between agencies over jurisdiction before a report was opened. Later that night, Nolan's parents met a deputy in a McDonald's parking lot and told him everything they knew. That same night, a friend of Christine's went to retrieve Nolan's phone from the house where he'd been staying. Elmore Wansley went to a different friend's home to collect Nolan's car and car keys. The parents have publicly said they had issues getting those items back. When Christine did get the phone, she and her sister went through it. She has said there were no photos or videos on Nolan's Snapchat from that day, which struck her as unusual because she described him as someone who normally documented everything. Now, Sunday, July 5th, the search. At 1:38 a.m., Marine Resources notified Ocean Springs Police that the Jackson County Sheriff's Office would take the lead. According to Marine Resources records, a Jackson County lieutenant reported that deputies had spoken with several friends who traveled to the island on the vessel with Nolan. Those friends said that when they left, Nolan was in the company of an unknown female, and that he chose to remain on the island. Based on that information, the records state, the deputy did not have reason to believe there were water-related emergencies, and believed the most likely scenario was that Nolan rode back in on another vessel without his phone. That assessment matters, because it shaped the pace of the first several hours. At around 8 a.m., Marine Resources launched a patrol vessel from the Biloxi small craft harbor and headed for the northwestern tip of the island. Nolan's father, Elmore Wansley, had already gone out to the island by boat with Nolan's former football coach to search on their own. Marine Resources records confirm that officers encountered that boat on the water and exchanged phone numbers with the coach to stay in contact during the search. The search escalated fast. The National Park Service, the Coast Guard, the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks, the Biloxi Fire Department, the Harrison County Sheriff's Office, Jackson County Fire Service, a Civil Air Patrol plane, a Jackson County helicopter, multiple privately owned vessels, and the volunteer group known as the United Cajun Navy. Marine Resources attempted 3 separate drone launches. All 3 failed. The first flight, beginning around 10 a.m., was grounded by a software issue that could not be repaired in the field. Around 10:30 a.m., additional drones were requested. 2 more flights launched. The last one ended abruptly when the battery physically separated from the drone after swelling in the heat. The report states that further flight attempts were canceled due to excessive heat. At 12:31 p.m., the Jackson County Sheriff's Office issued its public missing persons release, describing Nolan as an 18-year-old male, approximately 6 feet 1 inch, 180 pounds, last seen wearing blue swim trunks, no shirt, and sunglasses. At around 4:30 p.m., a Marine Resources officer contacted the mother of the teenager who had called CETO. She said her son had already spoken to the sheriff's office and that the family would cooperate in any way needed. The officer was given verbal consent to view the boat's Garmin GPS unit. He observed the track lines and used them to narrow the search area. At 5:54 p.m., the sheriff's office established a command post at the Lake Mars boat launch. That evening, Marine Resources ran sonar surveys off the northwest end of the island. The report states those surveys were inconclusive and were terminated due to adverse weather. At 9:52 p.m., Marine Resources Captain William Freeman emailed the Coast Guard requesting synthetic aperture radar data to guide further sonar scanning. The search parameters submitted in that email are part of the public record. They list a time of 1,800 hours, a position off the northwest tip of the island, clothing described as shorts only, food intake unknown, and alcohol intake listed as heavy. That last entry is important to understand correctly. It was information entered into a search and rescue drift model, not a laboratory finding. No official toxicology results have ever been publicly released in this case. Now, Monday, July 6th, United Cajun Navy aircraft were airborne just before 6 a.m. The last search boats launched just before 8 a.m. At around 8:45 a.m., Sheriff John Ledbetter confirmed that authorities had received a call reporting a body found at the northwestern tip of Horn Island. It was found by a United States Park Service ranger. Nolan's family was asked to come to the Lake Mars boat launch, where they were met by Sheriff Ledbetter and Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lind. Just after 11 a.m., the body was transported to the coroner's office in Pascagoula. Just before 1 p.m., Nolan's mother confirmed on Facebook that the person found on Horn Island was her son. He had been found in the water, in essentially the same area where he was last seen alive. Before we get into the forensics and the federal charges, take 1 second and subscribe. This case is still moving, and when the grand jury acts, we'll be covering it here. Now, the autopsies. There are 2, and the difference between them explains a lot of the frustration in this case. The official autopsy was performed on Tuesday, July 7th, at the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office Coast Lab. At around 2 p.m. that day, Coroner Bruce Lind confirmed to WLOX that the body had been identified as Nolan Wells through dental records. That same afternoon, the sheriff's office issued a public appeal. It asked anyone with original photos, videos, or eyewitness accounts from Horn Island on July 4th to come forward. Investigators specifically asked for original, unedited files, particularly those depicting alleged altercations or containing images believed to include Nolan Wells. Note the word original. Investigators wanted the source files with the metadata intact, not screen recordings and reposts. The family, meanwhile, retained attorney Ben Crump on July the 7th. On July 10th, a second privately funded autopsy was conducted in Washington, D.C., by forensic pathologist Dr. Roger A. Mitchell, Jr. His preliminary report was dated July 19th. Crump announced the findings on July 22nd at the 117th NAACP National Convention in Chicago. The finding was this: cause of death, undetermined pending investigation. Manner of death, undetermined pending investigation. Dr. Mitchell documented several significant limitations that prevented a conclusion. By the time he received the body, Decomposition had advanced to the point where he could not assess bruising or abrasions. He found no lacerations of the skin. He found no fractures of the skull. He did note a 12 by 8-inch area of red discoloration in the soft tissue at the back of the head. Certain organs had already been removed. That is not unusual after a first autopsy, particularly when specific organs are retained for further testing. But the throat was not received with the body. Because of that, Dr. Mitchell wrote that he could not rule out injury to the anterior neck structures as a contributing factor or cause of death. He also could not directly observe the airway for water or the stomach for gastric contents. Those two observations are central to determining whether a person drowned. Without them, a definitive answer is extremely difficult. His report listed 7 outstanding questions. Among them, what circumstances led to Nolan entering the water? What was the body position when found? Was there water in the airway? Was there any evidence of injury to the anterior neck? Was there any evidence of intracranial hemorrhage? What was the composition of the stomach contents? And what would toxicology show? Forensic pathologists who did not work on this case told CNN that the state's examiner would have access to things the independent examiner did not, including retained tissue, witness information, and the full evidentiary picture, and that the state autopsy was therefore more likely to resolve those questions. Around July 31st, multiple outlets reported that the state autopsy and the toxicology report were complete and had been forwarded to the Jackson County District Attorney. They have not been released. On July 23rd, District Attorney Angel Myers McElrath explained why. In a recorded statement, she said that every death in the county, except natural deaths and non-criminal car wrecks, is presented to the grand jury. She said her office has handled death investigations that way for her entire career. She said the pressure for answers does not change what the work requires, and that the responsibility is to complete the investigation thoroughly and without compromise. She has not said when the grand jury will take up the case. Now, the investigation itself. Sheriff Ledbetter confirmed in mid-July that his office had interviewed more than 60 witnesses. That included the 3 friends who traveled out on the boat with Nolan. The sheriff told the Sun-Herald they had been interviewed in depth. He also confirmed that the FBI was assisting with the examination of digital evidence. He described that as routine, noting that Horn Island sits on federal land and his office works with the FBI regularly. Marine Resources records show that on July 8th, investigators went and physically pulled GPS data from 2 separate boats connected to that day. In one case, the 21-year-old owner of a nearby vessel signed permission and personally brought the investigator to the boat. In the other, family members of the teenager on the boat that took on water gave permission for it to be searched, and the data was downloaded. Nolan's phone was recovered and eventually came into the possession of the family's legal team. Attorney Eric Hertz has said discussions have continued about a joint forensic examination of phones connected to the case, an inspection he expects would include the FBI if it proceeds. Now here is the contradiction that sits at the middle of everything. Sheriff Ledbetter has said that witnesses told investigators Nolan chose to remain on the island, believing he would return to the mainland with someone else, and that he stayed to talk with a young woman. Warren Hudson, a friend of Nolan's, said publicly in a podcast interview that the group was dealing with an emergency, that their boat was taking on water, and that Nolan made the decision to stay on the island with the young woman he was with. His stepmother, Jackson County Chancery Judge Ashley Cole, posted publicly that her stepson last saw Nolan around 3 p.m. and left the island at around 4:30 p.m., and that he has fully cooperated with law enforcement. Ben Crump has stated that the young woman gave his team a different account. According to Crump, she said Nolan told her he was going back to the boat. Crump put it plainly at a press conference. He said one of those accounts is true and one is not, and that they have to get to the bottom of it. Investigators have not publicly confirmed either version. Nolan's parents have also rejected the idea that he would have separated on his own. At a July 10th press conference, Elmore Wansley said they always taught their son that if you go with a group, you come back with the group. Another friend, Javon Williams, told CNN that he had never known Nolan to stay behind and watch his friends leave. Now, Alongside the official investigation, something else was happening, and it has produced the only criminal charges in this case so far. A video from July 4th began circulating online. Crump referenced it at a press conference, saying multiple people had identified a voice in it as Nolan's, in what sounded like an argument. On July 13th, a friend of Nolan's named Treseston Shepard came forward on Good Morning America and said the voice in that video was his own, not Nolan's. Then a photo of an alleged pool party started circulating and was reposted by Crump's team. Shepard told Rolling Stone that the party in that photo actually happened on Saturday, June 27th, a week before the trip. Warren Hudson later said the same. When asked about it, Crump said his team was sharing everything in order to get more people to come forward, and that reposting something does not mean authenticating it. AI-generated photos and videos related to the case also began spreading. Then, in early August, Mississippi Public Safety Commissioner Sean Tyndall issued a public warning that a supposed toxicology report circulating on social media was fraudulent. He said Nolan's family, his friends, and most importantly, Nolan himself, deserve better. Officials emphasized that no official toxicology report has been released. And underneath all of that, real people started getting threatened. On July 9th, Judge Ashley Cole posted screenshots of death threats she said she and her family had received. She had already deactivated her Facebook account once, saying she feared for her family's safety and did not believe her minor children's photographs should be circulating online. Treseston Shepard told ABC News that he and other friends of Nolan's had received threats as well. He said it worried him for his friends and his family. The FBI told ABC News it was working to address interstate threats received by individuals related to the matter. That brings us to the 3 arrests. On July 30th, Joseph Alfredo Vasquez Dumars, 27, of Sacramento, California, was arrested and charged with interstate transmission of a threatening communication. According to court documents, he is accused of sending a death threat to Judge Ashley Cole through Facebook Messenger, including a message claiming he had sent her a package. The charge carries a maximum of 5 years in prison, a fine of up to $250,000, and 3 years of supervised release. Also on July 30th, Michelle Francine Edwards of Cincinnati, Ohio, was charged under the same statute. According to a complaint reviewed by WLOX, she is accused of making bomb threats in a series of calls, reported as 29 in total, to the George County Chancery Clerk's Office and the Jackson County Sheriff's Office on July 23rd. And on July 31st, Edward James Porter, 40, of Berwyn, Illinois, was charged in United States District Court for the Southern District of Mississippi with transmitting threatening communications in interstate commerce. According to a probable cause affidavit sworn by Homeland Security Investigations Special Agent Christopher Clock, Porter is accused of repeatedly calling and texting 2 witnesses on July 31st, threatening to kill them, their families, and responding officers. The complaint alleges he texted one witness that person's own home address and later called, claiming to be outside their home. The affidavit describes how he was identified. Investigators subpoenaed records from the carrier, Boost Mobile, and traced the phone number and IP address used to place the calls and send the messages. Porter was also tracked to a second address in Maywood, Illinois. Attorney Russell Latino has said the 2 people threatened were family members of Bart Edmiston Jr., a 21-year-old who knew Nolan and was on the island that day, and that one of them is a witness in the death investigation. Now, this is the part that deserves emphasis. All 3 defendants are presumed innocent unless and until they are convicted in a court of law. And according to reporting on the complaints, none of the 3 appear to have known Nolan Wells, his family, or the group he traveled with. 3 people from 3 different states with no connection to this case now facing federal charges over what they allegedly did after reading about it online. The pressure has landed on the family, too. On July 29th, the family of Bart Edmiston Jr., through attorney Russ Latino, announced they would seek legal recourse against online creators who they say falsely accused him of being a suspect, of causing or contributing to Nolan's death, or of involvement in a cover-up. His family stated that he piloted his own boat to Horn Island and piloted his own boat home, that he has been an open book throughout the investigation, and that he allowed his boat and GPS device to be inspected without counsel, without requiring warrants, and without hesitation. They said a cease and desist letter and a spoliation letter were being served on one content creator identified as the origin of multiple accusations. Separately, a Give, Send, Go fundraiser was launched by Benjamin Hudson to cover legal costs for Warren Hudson, Jax Patalo, and Morgan Seymour. The campaign states the three have been wrongly blamed online and seeks funds to defend against potential wrongful death litigation and to pursue possible defamation claims. It had raised more than $90,000 as of early August. All three have maintained they cooperated fully with investigators. On the other side, the Reverend Al Sharpton announced a $50,000 reward at Nolan's funeral on July 20th. Tyler Perry matched it, bringing it to $100,000. On July 21st, NFL Hall of Famer Terrell Owens added $25,000, bringing the total reward to $125,000 for information leading to an arrest and conviction, if a crime occurred. Also following the funeral, Christine Wansley filed a court petition to be appointed administrator of her son's estate. The filing states that the estate consists solely of claims for damages resulting from the circumstances surrounding his death. That is a standard legal step, and it preserves the family's ability to bring a civil case. Then, on August 5th, 1 month after Nolan's body was found, Christine Wells Wansley was notified that the Mississippi Board of Nursing had opened a professional misconduct investigation into her based on a complaint filed anonymously. Ben Crump called it a warning shot at a grieving mother, meant to pressure and scare her into staying quiet. He noted she had worked her entire career in Mississippi without a single prior complaint to the board. Later that same day, Wansley announced on Facebook that the board had closed the investigation. She wrote that it had added more hurt to an already devastating time because she loves her job and she loves her patients. And she added that Nolan's case is still ongoing. Crump said afterward that the complaint should never have been filed, calling it frivolous and unfounded. Meanwhile, the family's legal team has continued its own parallel work. Crump has said forensic audio specialists are reviewing the complete sea tow call from July 4th. He has also said ocean engineering experts are examining how Nolan's body came to be recovered near the same northwestern tip of the island where he was last seen, given the tides. And on August 3rd, a 22-page independent analytical review was completed, examining photographs, videos, GPS coordinates, and witness accounts. That report is careful about what it does not do. It states explicitly that it reaches no conclusion about criminal or civil responsibility. What it concludes is this: the available evidence still leaves what the report calls a material gap in the timeline between Nolan's last independently corroborated sighting and the reported departure of the boat that carried him to the island. The report found that the search GPS coordinates closely matched independently supplied mapping data and that multiple photographs consistently depicted the same cluster of boats, but it also found that vessel labels in those photos were source annotations, not independently verified identifications. It found that timestamps appearing in social media screen recordings cannot be treated as definitive without the original files and metadata, and it found that the available materials do not independently verify the reported time that Nolan's boat departed Horn Island. Instead of conclusions, the report lists what investigators may still need: authenticated video metadata, vessel GPS records, complete occupant lists for each boat, additional witness statements, and confirmation of when various boats changed position that afternoon. So where does this case actually stand today? The Mississippi State Medical Examiner's autopsy is complete. Toxicology is complete. Both are with the Jackson County District Attorney. Neither has been made public. The sheriff's investigation remains open. More than 60 witnesses have been interviewed. The FBI is assisting with digital evidence. District Attorney Angel Myers McElrath will present the case to a Jackson County grand jury, which will decide whether any charges are warranted. No date has been announced. Sheriff Ledbetter has said there were no initial signs of foul play and has repeatedly asked the public to come forward with factual information, even information people might think is insignificant. No one has been charged in connection with Nolan Wells's death. The 3 friends who traveled on the boat with him are witnesses in an open investigation. They have not been accused by any investigator of any wrongdoing. That is the legal reality, and it stays the legal reality unless and until a grand jury says otherwise. And that leaves the question that everything comes back to. Between 3 p.m., when Nolan Wells was last confirmed seen, and 4:31 p.m., when the boat left without him, there is a window that has not been reconstructed from independent evidence. Not from video with verified metadata, not from GPS, not from any account that has been publicly corroborated. Roughly 90 minutes. On a federal island with no cameras, no cell towers, and no infrastructure. Everything in this case, the 2 autopsies, the FBI's digital work, the ocean engineering analysis, the 60-plus interviews, is an attempt to fill that window. So here's what I want to hear from you in the comments. Given the drone failures, the inconclusive sonar, the jurisdiction confusion in those first hours, and the fact that the search didn't fully scale until the morning of July 5th, do you think the initial response cost investigators evidence they can never get back? And second, the district attorney says withholding the autopsy until a grand jury reviews it is standard practice in her office for every non-natural death. Legally, that's accurate. But in a case with this much public attention, do you think transparency should have been handled differently? Keep it respectful down there. Real families are reading. If you want the update when that grand jury convenes, subscribe now, because that's the moment this case either becomes a criminal prosecution or becomes something else entirely. Here is what is confirmed, and it is worth ending on. An 18-year-old went to an island 10 miles offshore on the 4th of July. We know when the boat left, 9:56 a.m. We know when it arrived, 11:14 a.m. We know when he was last seen, 3 p.m. We know when the boat departed without him, 4:31 p.m. We know when he was found, 8:45 a.m. on July 6th. We have a GPS track accurate to 1/10 of a knot for a boat. And more than a month later, we still do not have a cause of death for the young man who didn't come home on it.